Did you all get the pop-up box?
Got it.
Yes.
Perfect. Um, and then, yeah, I think if you want, we can just, if everyone's ready, we can start to let folks in. And I'd say just because my whole screen is taken up, if you want to just continue, everyone is a co-host. So if you want to just continue to let people in, if it seems like people are waiting, just go for it.
Thank you. Let's let them in.
So I just hit admit all?
Yep.
Okay.
Welcome. Thank you for being with us this evening. Just going to give it a little bit, and we'll begin at 7:03. Thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll begin in about 2 more minutes. Welcome. So, Delana, sweetheart, please. Mommy's live. Thank you for joining us. We'll get started in about a minute. Thank you for being here with us this evening. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. My name is Urga Purette, and I will open up this event with a land acknowledgement. I am zooming in from the city of Malden. We acknowledge the history of genocide and forced removal that First Nations peoples experienced at the hands of white settlers and the continued harmful impacts of colonialism. In Malden, we acknowledge that the land we live, work, learn, and commune on is the original homelands of the Pennacook and Massachusetts First Nations people. We honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous peoples still connected to this land in our communities. And now I'll pass it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Urga. I would like to echo Urga's welcome. We're so glad to see you all here tonight. The NAACP was formed as a multiracial organization in 1909 by such luminaries as I.W. Wells and W.E.B. Du Bois. Today, the NAACP consists of more than 2 million activists across the country. The Mystic Valley Area Branch, that is presenting this evening, was established almost 50 years ago by a group of civic leaders from West Medford. The Medford branch eventually changed its name to the Mystic Valley Area Branch as it grew and incorporated with those in neighboring communities active in civil rights advocacy. Currently, the Mystic Valley Area Branch includes Medford, Malden, Everett, Woburn, Arlington, and Winchester, as you can see by my shirt. We have an active youth chapter, and we're engaged in a range of projects in our member communities, work that's aimed at creating a racially just society in which everyone can live out their potential. Currently active committees include the Reparations Committee, about which you'll hear more in a moment, Education Committee, Political Action Committee, Environmental Justice Committee, and an Economic Development Committee. If you're passionate about racial justice, we invite you to join the Mystic Valley Area Branch of the NAACP. And now I'd like to pass it to Robin Kuttner, who's going to tell you a bit more about the Reparations Committee.
Good evening, everyone. I've been a member of the Reparations Committee for the last about 2 years. The Reparations Committee of the Mystic Valley chapter of the NAACP was formed through the vision of Chiffon Wong in 2019. Our mission is to pursue both national and local opportunities to right the wrongs of slavery and its aftermath. We are currently looking at local communities and their initiatives in terms of exploring their histories, educating people, creating harms reports, and advocating for reparations. By learning more about the role of local communities in the history of enslavement and the current continuing impact of that history, we believe more people will understand the importance of reparations and the need to take action for centuries of harm done. This is the second of a series of events. At our May roundtable, we heard about both current and future educational and action steps by 4 local groups, including the Melrose Reparations Group, who agreed graciously to return to us tonight to talk in more detail about their work. You can hear the recording of the event on the Mystic Valley Area Branch website. Don't need to be a member to access it. And now I'm going to turn it over to Urga.
Slide, please. Reparations for what? Next slide. Please take a minute to look at the images. The case, and this is a quote from Ta-Nehisi Coates, the case I make for reparations is virtually every institution with some degree of history in America, be it public, be it private, has a history of extracting wealth and resources out of the African American community. 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, 35 years of racist housing policy. Until we reckon with our compounding moral debt, America will never be whole. Let's think about that. And tonight we will be connecting those dots. Next slide. This is a quote from Byron Rushing to really reflect upon. It will only be in the year 2111 that people of African descent in America will have been free for as long as they were enslaved. This evening, we are going to learn how the connections are being made from slavery to the injustices that continue on. And we're hoping that we can become more aware so that we can come together in a collective way to bring forth the necessary change that is needed. Healing needs to happen. And now I'll pass it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Urga. And now it's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speakers tonight, Jane and Corey Allen. I've come to know both Jane and Corey through our work as facilitators with the anti-racism community education program, White People Challenging Racism, Moving from Talk to Action. Jane is a public health professional and Corey is a public media professional. They met 25 years ago in a graduate school course on data analysis. And as you'll see, they're putting that training to very good use. Jane and Corey now live in Melrose, where they're part of a group called Reparations for Melrose. They're committed to working within their spheres of influence to dismantle anti-Black systemic racism. So join me in welcoming our presenters tonight, Jane and Corey Allen.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you all. I'm going to share our presentation. So we're very grateful to you all for being here to hear about our reparations toolkit. And first, I just want to introduce you to the idea, what is the reparations toolkit? What is this about? So this is a set of easy to follow instructions for documenting racial inequities in cities and towns in Massachusetts. And we use municipal level data from the state to do that. And then in a little bit, Corey will give you some other important resources as well. But these toolkits are based on state data. And our 4 areas of focus to date are exclusionary school discipline, teacher representation, arrests, and home loans. The toolkit was developed by a group called Reparations for Melrose. We are working to end anti-Black systemic racism in Melrose. And our objective is to research and document current and historical harms with the goal of making systemic racism, with the goal of making systemic changes, I should say, and providing reparations for institutional racism. And I want to acknowledge the teams working for reparations in Evanston and Amherst. And Corey, this might be a good time for you also to talk about the inspiration that we've received from Saskia.
Yeah, even locally, Saskia Van James visited our group and said it really that to do the work and to also connect with other communities. So being here tonight is a great step towards that request she asked of us.
Mm-hmm. Great. So Corey, I'll actually, why don't you continue on and tell us?
Sure. So yeah we're going to show 2 articles, and these were important to us for 2 ways. First, they showed us that the data existed. This is how we learned about the data that was available for us to analyze. So Jane read this article in September 2020 and wondered, well, what does this data say for Melrose, and analyze the data. The second important things it does is it provides framing reference to report back to stakeholders. You saw this report in the Boston Globe about students in Boston. Here is the story from Melrose. And the next slide, the same story. This story from BUR is how I first came to know that the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data was available for people to download and analyze. And then secondly, their reporting provided a way, what they reported in Boston provided the framework to report it for Melrose. So it's really valuable. And anytime we're reading articles, we're definitely saying, are they reporting data at the city level, and are they reporting by race? Because if we have city and we have race, we can see what that data is saying about our city.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so we just wanted to start by talking about some of our sources of inspiration, kind of acknowledging and lifting them up and letting you know about them. So our agenda for tonight is first, Corey and I are going to walk you through two of our toolkits. The first one is the school discipline toolkit, and the second one is the arrest toolkit. And then we want to also just share with you some of the things that we've learned through this work over the last couple of years, including the importance of building a team, other sources of information for harms reports, and linked with that, what history is your city or town telling about itself? And then we're going to give you some tips for sharing findings and managing pushback, which I'm sure you will experience as we have so many times. And finally, it's really important to us that we build community for this work. And so we'll just end on that note, talking about wanting to connect with you and inviting you all to be in community with us. And we'll have time for questions also. So Corey, unless you have anything to add, I'll jump into
Great,
school
go ahead.
discipline toolkit. Okay, great. Oh, I did actually have one more thing I want to say. So as we go through these toolkits, please don't feel like you have to write something down or you have to remember this or you have to do it like really quickly while we're showing it to you. This tonight is to familiarize you with what is available to you. These toolkits are available on our website. You can get them anytime, and it walks you through the instructions. And moreover, there's a video tutorial that we've already created that goes into a great deal more depth than we can even go into tonight. So, and you have our email address, or you will have our email address before you leave tonight. So this is all just to say, like, sit back, just take it in and know that you don't have to be like writing things down or scrambling to copy links or anything like that. So, okay, with that, the school discipline toolkit. So this toolkit, like all of our toolkits, starts with an overview of the reparations toolkit, including some information about what we can learn from the data that we're going to analyze, and then the video tutorial that I mentioned, and then step-by-step instructions. So each of the 4 toolkits, you'll see this slide in the beginning. So what can we learn from these data? The data I'm going to show you on school discipline are from the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and we use them to look at racial inequities in exclusionary school discipline, which is discipline that takes young people out of the classroom. The most common type of exclusionary school discipline is suspension, and research shows that suspending students is ineffective and harmful, especially for Black youth and other youth of color. And the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed advises against the use of exclusionary school discipline, except in cases of violence. So in the case of nonviolent offenses, they would not recommend this. And yet we see that this continues. This continues in our own city where Corey and I live in Melrose. Even a couple of years ago, the city was saying they were going to suspend students for parking in the teachers' parking spots. So clearly not a violent offense. And yet the threat of suspension is there, and then the harm associated with that suspension. Okay, so now we'll walk through the step-by-step instructions on using the data. You're going to see a link. It's in the toolkit, and you can right-click on the link in the toolkit, and that will open a sheet in a new tab. And this sheet, let me go forward and show it to you. This is what it will look like. It's a blank sheet, but we're going to fill it in. It does have behind a couple of cells, there is some code so that some of these cells will automatically calculate when you paste the data in. First, I'm having trouble by flipping 2 slides by accident tonight. So the first thing you need to do is make a copy of the sheet and save it to your own computer or save it to your own Google account. This is important because the sheet, as you download it, is not usable to you. It's read-only. So you're going to need to make a copy to use it. And then we're going to have you open the actual data source from the state. So again, if you right click on this link, it will open in a new tab, and that will be nice for you because you'll have all your separate tabs open. You'll have the instructions, you'll have the sheet that we created for you, the copy of the sheet, and then you'll have the data. When you go to the state website, this is what you're going to see. And you're going to enter the name of your city or town in this box here. It's a drop-down menu. You can also type the name of your city or town, which is a little easier than scrolling, especially if you have a city or town name that is at the latter half of the alphabet. And then you're going to click the orange arrow right to the right of that box. That will take you to data for your city or town. And you can confirm that you're in the right place because in the upper left-hand corner, I hope you can see on the screen, it says Melrose, but you'll see the name of your city or town at the top of the screen on the left-hand side. So then we're going to click on the Students tab, and then on the Student Discipline tab, which is 2/3 the way down this column on the left. That finally brings us to the data of interest to us. And Corey has reminded me that it might be helpful for you to know that this is the format for the data for all municipalities in Massachusetts and for all the years, for 10 years worth of data. So, and that's what makes this possible. So we're going to paste it in the sheet, and for all of you, it will calculate the rates of discipline by race, and it will do that accurately because it is a standard formula. So you're going to copy the rows in the table, starting with all students, and then you're going to move over to your sheet and simply paste it in. And what's going to happen is these colored cells at the bottom that we have added are going to automatically fill. And so what these represent, the black cell is the discipline rate by, sorry, the blue cell is the discipline rate by race for Black students. The green cell is the discipline rate by race for white students. And the yellow cell is the rate at which Black students are disciplined relative to white students in your city. So if you look at the code behind these cells, if you click on the cell, it will show you at the top of the sheet what the code is, just for your information. But I also just want to explain to you how we calculate it. So if you look at the second column, I know it's really small, but if you look at the C column, that's the number of students disciplined. So we, for example, go down the column to African American Black, and we say 16 African American and Black students were disciplined out of 228 students in Massachusetts. And you literally just divide 16 by 228, and it gives you 7. And if you do this by hand, your numbers will be a little different because the spreadsheet is actually calculating more decimal points than you can see here. So, and the same for the white. To calculate the white rate of discipline, you can go down to the very bottom row, and you can see that 17 white students were disciplined out of 2,996 students. And that gives you the rate of white discipline at 0.6%, less than 1%. And then you divide 7% by 0.6%, and you get 12%. So Black student in this year, which is the 2021-2022 school year, Black students in Melrose were disciplined at 12 times the rate as white students. Okay, so one thing that you might want to do, we have been interested in doing it ourselves, is going back in time to other years. And you can do that by using these arrows up the top. So you can see, I think, that you can navigate back that way. And we have 10 years of data here in this data set, in this website. So before you share your findings, just a couple of tips. We just check that you've got the right city or town, check that you've got the year that you had in mind, check that you pasted the data in accurately, like spot check a couple of your cells against the data in the state website, just so that you have comfort that everything went well. And we always have a practice of having someone else check your work. And in our group Reparations from Melrose, we're really lucky to have a really tight team, and we can send our work to them and they will run through it all. And it's great. They catch our mistakes and we support each other that way. I wanted also just to share with you a couple of images of what we've done with the data. So this is looking at the rate of discipline for Black students and white students over time, over approximately the last decade. The Black student discipline rate is in red, substantially higher than the rate of discipline for white students in every year that we looked at, in some years quite a bit higher. And so it's helpful to see over time that this underscores that we have a problem. We're seeing this pattern consistently over time. Another thing we did is we combined 10 years of data and took the average rate of inequity for each city for Melrose and 2 concentric circles of municipalities around Melrose, so that we could understand what the inequity in school discipline looks like here relative to surrounding communities. This is, again, a little bit eye-opening for people in Melrose who think basically this isn't a problem here.
It's also an opportunity for community building because a lot of our neighboring cities do not have the high rate, that we do, the discrepancy. And so there's probably learnings and best practices that could be shared.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for saying that. So, and now, Corey, if you're ready to jump into the arrests toolkit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in the school discipline, you're copying a table that the state had provided on their website. With the arrest toolkit, we're going to be collecting the data and then making a table out of that data. So we're kind of going one step back in the process. But you can see on the next slide what we are looking at here. Cities provide detailed arrest records each year to Massachusetts. You can see in the sentence the whole process and agencies of collection. I want to point out the last sentence of the first bullet, which is the data is available to view and query in various formats and is utilized for various reports and to lead and guide policy decisions. So it's available for us to look at, to see if we have racial harms, and to work with our leaders to question and address them. So what we will be doing in this toolkit is determining the percentage of arrest by race and then comparing that arrest percentage to the population percentage, for Melrose. So on the next slide, the step-by-step instructions, you'll see the link on the next slide. It's very similar to what Jane had made. It's a read-only Google Sheet you can right-click on, and you can see right here, it'll take you to the Google Sheet. This does not have any calculations embedded in it. You are simply grabbing that first row because I've simplified. If you were to copy all the data in, that header row would take up multiple rows. That'd be hard for analysis. So you just need to get this single row into your own spreadsheet. I have made instructions kind of assuming you've never used Google Sheets at all, so we can go through quickly. But that top left corner square, that cell right above row 1 and to the left of column A, I always click on that just to highlight the whole sheet. So you do that, you go to the edit bar on the menu, you click copy. The next slide, if you want to bring it into your own Google account, if you've never used Google Sheets, you go to Google, there's that little waffle, those 9 squares up there, you click on that. The next slide, it will open up options. You'll want to click on Drive, and then you'll see when you get to the Drive screen, there's a plus new button. And if you click on that, an option for Google Sheets will appear. You'll see the kind of the options you have. You'll want to go to Google Sheets, select blank spreadsheet. And on the next slide, you'll see what that looks like. Untitled spreadsheet, drop down from edit to paste, and that's going to paste in the row or the spreadsheet you copied off our Reparations for Melrose account. Then you just name the sheet, arrest records for my city, whatever city you have. And now we go about the process of collecting the data. So we've provided the link here to the mass.gov crime statistics website. So you can right click on that link, and the page that load will not have the link you need. You're going to have to scroll down, but as you scroll down, you will see under all other tasks, view detailed arrest information. Click on that link, and then this will load. You'll see this page, and at the top left, there will be a drop-down option for jurisdiction. So that is where you would use the drop down and select your city. So I went and selected Melrose. The next slide, you'll see, oh, you'll need to click View Report in the very far right corner. So you select Melrose, click View Report, then it's going to process the report for Melrose. And what you need to do is the first row of data, the very corner, you just want to highlight all the data, and make sure it's all there and it's for you to copy. So right click, or I think the next slide I have me using the edit copy. Yeah, so just go up to your browser, edit copy, and then go back to your spreadsheet and select paste. And so you paste it in. Again, Control V should work, or but paste the data in. And the next slide, you'll see this is how it should look. It's very clean. Every data point is in its own cell. All the columns line up. The dates are all in the date column. Age is in the age column. Agency is important. Just like Jane was saying, make sure you have the correct city. Agency will be a check on that you're looking at the correct city. It's also a very important field because it's an easy variable to count by, because it never changes in the data set you build. So we'll make use of that agency column, but this is how it should look. That's pretty quick. I hope that's quick for everyone. And what I have found is, since it's so quick, you should just build out your data set since you've got the process. So on the next slide, I'll show you how to do that. Right to the right of jurisdiction, there's a year drop down. So it defaulted to 2023, drop down for 2022. Click View Report, 2022 appears. Same thing, just highlight all the data, make sure it's all ready to be copied, copy it, and paste it in. And you're going to want to paste it in the first empty cell underneath the data you had pasted in from the previous year, from 2023 in this case. So just, and that's how it should look. When you add it, again, it should line up. Everything is lined up perfectly. It is, ready to be analyzed. I put together 20 years, in one, in not a long period of time, because it's just once you're in the process. And so at the next slide, you can see we'll do step-by-steps on analyzing the data. So to do that, on the next slide, we'll see, again, you're going to want to click on that cell up in the corner, above all the rows and to the left of the column, and just to highlight everything. It's just a safeguard to make sure the whole sheet is being used. And you're going to want to go to Insert on the menu bar, drop down to Pivot Table. So you're going to select Pivot Table, and then a dialog box is going to pop up, and it's going to say Create Pivot Table. New sheet will probably be checked. If it's not, yes, you want to put this in a new sheet, and then click Create. And on the next slide, you'll see this is what it looks like when it'll take you to the new sheet. And the new sheet is an empty pivot table, and to the right is that pivot table editor, and that's where it's waiting for you to add rows and columns and data to fill out the table. So we will start doing that on the next slide. The first thing I do, again, is kind of a record check, is go to pivot table editor, see values, and click add. And it's going to ask you which data, which column do you, or which source do you want to add in. I want to add agency. Again, that was where Melrose was listed each time. So agency, and then the next slide, it's going to ask you, how do you want to calculate or summarize this data? How? You're going to want to use that little down caret and select count A, which is just a way of saying just count the records. Don't multiply, divide, tell me the maximum. I just want you to count them. And you'll see it's doing that up in the corner in cell A2. It's counting 182. And if I were to go to my spreadsheet, I would see there's 182 rows of data. And that's how I know, like, okay, pivot table is capturing everything. this is all working fine. So we know the pivot table is counting all records. The next step is we want to add, oh yeah, so this is
I'm
just,
sorry.
no, that's fine. This
You
is
already
the
said this.
confirmation. It's just, again, it never hurts to confirm things. So this is the
Mhm.
confirmation. The next slide is when we want to add race. So we go to columns and we click on add. Again, all the variable options appear and we select race. And then on the next slide, you will see that it has added the column for each race category. Now that 182 is still there in G3, that grand total. So we're still looking at the same number of records, but what it has done is it has shown each race and how that, add those up and you will get 182. So we now have all the records with the count by race of each arrest record. So the next step is, and this one, there's a show total, that green check mark, that's almost always there by default, but if it's not there, just make sure it's checked. That's how you get the count by race. So the next slide, really, it's what we want to do is look at the count of Black or African American individuals, cited in arrest record. So that's 29, and then divide that by the grand total of 182. So that gets you 15.9%, essentially 16%. So Black individuals were in 16% of all arrest records in Melrose from the couple of years I collected for this exercise. So as I mentioned, you should build a multi-year database while you're at it. And here's how you can make that, turn that into data you can use. So you're going to want to go to the pivot table editor and then go to rows and select add. And again, it gives you all the variable options. You want to select arrest date. And so you click on arrest date. I don't know why it does this, but it just gives you every single date in the database. That's not helpful, but that's how it's going to do it. And so what we need to do is, and again, I mentioned the show totals, the green checks, you'll see it's all there. That's why we're seeing the totals. That should happen automatically. But we have every single date for every arrest record. Not helpful, but we can fix it. Next slide is click on any single date that is shown in the table. So I clicked on the first one, and you need to right click on it. So right click on any date in that column. And it's when you right click, options will appear. And you're going to want to select create pivot date group. So it's going to give you that option. As you see, there's an arrow, and that gives you a lot of other options to create a pivot date group. And we want to select year. I want the data grouped by year. And so the next slide, it does that, very easily, which I'm thankful for. So now you see the arrest records by year with the race totals. So again, we're just dividing the Black or African American individuals in arrest records, column D, by the grand total, column G. So in 2020, Black people accounted for 23% of arrests in Melrose. That's 11 of a grand total of 48. 11% in 2021, that's 8 divided by 70, and 16% in 2022, that's 8 of 50. And then on the next slide, you'll see since I was able to build 20 years of data, this is some of the visualizations we were able to make in our reporting. So we could see the percent of Black individuals involved in arrest records in Melrose by year. And the troubling concern is the percent has increased in the 3 most recent years of data. So 23% in 2020, that's the highest we'd had to date, 11% in 2021, and 16% in 2022, which had matched the previous high before 2020 of 2015. So two of the 3 highest years were in the most recent, were in this decade. So, and the other thing we looked at is you can also report the arrest records allows, when reported, for race unknown to be added. And what we have seen is in the past 2 years, the percent of race unknown has also increased. And so a question we need to ask our city leaders is, why has that increased? Has there been a change in practice on how they're reporting race, or is this worse? Is this masking even more arrest of Black individuals? So this is the value of looking through this data and seeing what stories are being told. We have two important trends to ask of our city leaders. And then so the final point is, well, compared to what? What does this mean? So an easy baseline is your city population. So let's compare the percent of Black individuals involved in arrest in Melrose with the percent of Black residents in Melrose. So to get that data, I recommend search, just Google it. If you put in the Google term, what percentage of your city's residents are Black, Google may just give you the answer right there. It did for me, 3.4%. One of the top search results should be from the US Census Bureau Quick Facts. I have that link highlighted. So if you click on that, we'll show you that example. It will give you a page, and you see down below there's race and Hispanic origin, and you see the race compositions. And again, that's the 3.4% that Google found. The problem is just this page was not user-friendly for us. We were trying to check neighboring cities through this site, and it wasn't taking us to them. It wasn't changing off Melrose. So it's fine if you search and go there, but I can't recommend it as a link that would be useful I would just Google it every time, I guess is my point, or whatever search engine you use. And then, so again, just for kind of storytelling, in 2020, Black people accounted for 23% of arrests in Melrose, 11% in 2021, 16% in 2022. These are all well above the percent of Black people who live in Melrose at 3.4%. And again, it's well outside the population distribution. And anytime you're that far outside of what the population, things that should kind of match more population level statistics, those are concerns. The data is telling a troubling story, and we need to, again, meet with leaders, document the harm, and meet with leaders to address it.
Thank you so much, honey. One of the things you've talked about in the past with me is how we saw those arrests of Black individuals in Melrose go up just at the time of the murder of George Floyd, and then a somewhat of a decline in the next year, but at the same time, an increase in the number of arrests of people with race unknown. And so
yes,
I think that sparked concern for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
With that specific timing, like.
Yes, right. Yeah, when yes, was there a practice of color blindness? Is race unknown being some way to avoid, reporting? And that's again what we need to ask. So we've analyzed it. Now we have questions to take and investigate.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, we just wanted to move in now to the phase of the presentation where we share a few tips about what we have learned through our experience. And the first and most important one is to work with a team, if at all possible. You can do this work alone, but it's so much better to work with a team. First of all, we just are able to support one another and encourage one another. And we're so fortunate to have an amazing team of people in Reparations for Melrose. And everybody brings different gifts and experience to the team. And so we have people who are good with data, and people who are good writers, and people who are good editors. We have people who are always willing to run through examples or check the data quality. And we have a social media expert who is really good at communicating findings. And we have a historian who can give us context for our work. We have someone who's really good with IT who can support with technical issues. And so I would just say that it's just so beneficial to build a team. And I urge you to do it, especially this work. We've been at it for a couple of years, and I think it's easier to stick with it if you are surrounded by a team of people with different gifts. Corey, anything to add on this?
No, that's says
Okay.
great.
Great. Well, I want to turn it over to you then.
Sure.
Oops,
Yeah,
wrong slide.
no.
There we go.
So I had mentioned we're always looking at news articles that are reporting issues on race in society and at a city level, but those aren't the only sources you can turn to. Your city or town will almost certainly have some sort of strategic plan, and those provide, and other sorts of city documents. Those are all worth looking into, and because again, that's the story the city is telling about itself, and we want to make sure, like, are they telling the true story, and could they be telling a truer story of themselves? So we have, I think the first one we have is the the Melrose Ford from 2017, that strategic plan. And then more recently, they've done a housing production plan. And obviously, before this meeting, we were talking about race and housing and how, that's a terrible legacy of systemic racism that, justice has still not been enacted for that harm. So that was a great plan to look at and see the priorities and see how Melrose was talking about itself. And so just kind of on those examples, this meeting started with a land acknowledgement. I think if you go to the next slide, and now when we meet, we always do recognize, Melrose we're the ancestral lands of the Massachusetts people, and the Massachusetts people are still living on the land and living with us. So, but if you look at the city plan in 2004, Melrose didn't exist till 150 years ago. Like there was no history before 150 years. And then in I think the next slide, the housing production plan, you see the land occupied by Melrose was once home to the Massachusetts and Pawtucket people indigenous to the region. So you're getting a little bit more of that land acknowledgement. You're understanding, that history didn't begin with European settlement. So that story is emerging in these documents. For redlining, it was a footnote in like a 2020 city report. In the housing production plan, it did get mentioned, but not nearly to the degree that Ta-Nehisi Coates was mentioning. Like they said it, shaped our community, but it profoundly shaped our community. It continues to shape who is able to live here in Melrose. So that story is not being told. I looked at Arlington's strategic plan a couple of years ago to see if they talked about redlining. It's a big plan. I was reading through it. I just started searching. The only time red lines came up in search was talking about the T-stops in Arlington, the red line running through Arlington. So they are not talking about their history because they were also a community shaped by redlining. So one goal we have for ourselves is, can we work to make sure the city is telling the true story of its role in systemic racism and the legacies of that? And are they fixing those harms? And then I think the next slide.
Yep. If you don't mind talking about sharing your findings.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
just want to acknowledge, Kathleen, I see your hand, but if you could hold your question, we will have time for questions, and then I'll just make it a note for us to come to you first.
It's very important to share our findings, and that's where I mentioned a lot of times the news stories are so important because they provide a reference, a framing point to tell those stories about Melrose. A kind of a reflex for a lot of people in Melrose is, that's not us. We don't have these problems. That's a problem in the big city. And it's like, no, this is exactly us. We have the same problems. So we've written letters to elected officials, leaders of cities, institutions. Again, social media is an extremely valuable way to distribute findings. Letters and opinion pieces in the local newspaper are still very impactful. We had a candidate forum a few weeks ago for the mayoral election, and we asked specific questions from what we had found through all this work. And so that they're now aware of those racial harms. They've been informed, they've had to think about them, they've had to make some response of how they would address them if elected. And then that also leads to further discussion with elected officials and members of the community. And again, this work started from a member of another community, Saskia in Cambridge, coming to our group and saying, you have to do the work and you have to connect with other cities, because it's cities supporting reparation movements that will allow for states to support reparation movements, that will allow for federal support, which is really the most important way to have real meaningful change. And so, you know, we are here because other communities reached us.
I love that.
And I think we have screen grabs, I mentioned there was a Globe article on July 1st of this year about the racial homeownership gap. Was very stark in Greater Boston. I was able to tailor it exactly to Melrose. Jane, the next one is Jane wrote the school committee. Discipline disparity is still there. Has made social media posts. If you saw this article in the Globe, it's true for us as well. And again, I wrote to the local newspaper. This was reported about Boston. Here is the story from Melrose. It is as bad or worse in some ways. So, and it again provided the chance to a great frame of reference to localize the story to our own city. And we found that's a very powerful way to get the message. It helps storytell, it helps frame the analysis, it helps provide a natural comparison.
Yeah, thank you so much, Corey. So just a couple more slides because I know we're running a little long and we want time for questions. But I'm absolutely sure that you will experience pushback when you start to publicize your findings. Almost everything we've put out, we've received pushback on. And the kind of things we hear are that, oh, the sample size is too small, the data aren't good. And I guess the first thing I want to just say to you is that pushback is designed to dismiss and devalue the findings and you, and to take the focus off the racial inequities and to pretend there's some other problem that needs to be more urgently solved and it's a data problem. So we both just encourage you not to engage in that to the degree that you can. Just that's not your job. Like, your goal is to highlight, spotlight, bring to light and share the racial inequities that are going on. And your job is not to defend state data. The institutions that are reporting the data to the state, the data quality is their responsibility. So if somebody has a problem with the data, they can own the findings and they can also own the data. We do have some approaches to deal with the pushback of the sample size is too small. And that's why, for example, you saw us look at 10 years of data. Well, guess what? When people say the sample size is too small, they're saying you can't learn anything about it. Well, we have the same finding over 10 years, consistent finding. I think there's a problem. And that's also why we combined data over 10 years and showed compared to other cities. It's like, you can't argue with these data. So we just want to prepare you for that experience. And then last, we want to be in community with you. We want you to build community with us and with others. Connect with us. If you have any questions or any trouble with the toolkit, if you find an error or something, like, we want to know, we want to partner with you. You may have resources that we don't have. We've really struggled to find city level data showing racial disparities in healthcare. Sometimes we've thought we're kind of seeing it in state databases, but doesn't seem very accessible. So if you have data sources, we would love to hear from you. And again, the idea really is to get engaged in the work together so that we can pave the way for reparations at the state level. And then, as Corey said, beyond. And so, Corey, anything to add on that before I just go to?
That was great.
Okay, thanks, honey. Okay, so this is where you can find the toolkit. We'll also put this in the chat. And this is our Gmail address where you can email us if you want to. And finally, we just want to thank the Mystic Valley area branch of the NAACP. We are super grateful for the opportunity to be here with you tonight. So thank you. I'll stop sharing so that we can see one another better as we move into questions. Oh, thanks, Corey. You put in the website. Great. So Kathleen had a question. And I don't know if the attendees can speak into the space or if they can only chat. I can't remember.
So you can hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I guess the attendees can speak into the space.
Okay, great.
All right. My name is Kathleen Anderson. I'm the former president of the Amherst NAACP.
Okay.
I'm currently the female co-chair of the New England chapter of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America.
Great.
I'm part of a group in Massachusetts in the state that is sponsoring our second or third statewide convening on reparations. That will be on September 27th at 7 p.m. starting. It is virtual. And I wanted to put the registration link in the chat, but the chat is disabled.
I think I
So
can find that and put that in for you. I think I have it. I have the link from an email I have, so I can put that in.
Great.
Okay.
It's not disabled anymore.
Oh, okay, great.
Great.
So, yes.
Okay.
All the better.
I'll send put the updated registration link in the chat.
Mhm.
People are welcome to attend. Again, that's September 27th. That's next week. We will have Senator Miranda in our meeting. We have been talking with various representatives in the state to get them to support reparations. I live in Amherst. Amherst is the second municipality in the country that has granted a reparations fund to Black citizens of Amherst. So we're looking forward to a good conversation on the 27th. And I hope that as many people as can attend will. Again, we'll have a State Senator Miranda present to talk with us about reparations in the state, throughout the state of Massachusetts, and what is transpiring there. So I'll put that
Wonderful.
link to the registration in the chat, and hopefully people can get it before this shutdown of this meeting, and so they'll have access to that.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathleen.
And Michelle is asking if it will be recorded so that it's available, and I think so. Yes, it'll be recorded.
Great. Wonderful. I think Thea, do you have your hand raised?
I do. I'm wondering
Great.
how many towns you have talked to and how many towns are working on this in Massachusetts, if you know.
We are sort of like loosely tracking, like we've talked with friends in Malden about this, and I think I analyzed some data for some people in Malden as well as in Medford, as well as I think Michelle for you in your community, and then Corey, well, Saskia,
But
was
this is the
taking it.
first time we've really done a toolkit or any, we've not had any sort of official meetings. That's why we're kind of making that introduction and hope that we
Yeah.
can, be in community from this meeting.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like it's all been kind of just one-off connections, but we are trying to build something a little more robust now. And we thought
Thank
this
you
would be
so
a good
much.
chance.
Thank you so much for doing this work. Very much
thank you.
exciting.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments or anything?
The other toolkits on our website, reparationsformelrose.org, are educator representation. So do do your teachers look like your student body? Is there a symmetry in the composition of students to composition of teachers? And then one that's, if you want to look at home mortgage loans. So that's one that is really useful. And there's a lot of data once you get into that, yeah, you can really see the disparities in housing and mortgage loan approvals.
That's great. Did you see the question in the chat on that, Corey? You just answered it like almost like psychically. What's next with the toolkits? So those are 2 that are ready to go. And as I mentioned, we're trying to find some data on healthcare. So if anyone has any tips for us, we would welcome them. And Michelle, I see your hand is raised.
Hey, Jane and Corey,
Hi.
thank you. Great job. And
Thank you.
so I wanted to ask, how, you shared, obviously you've been getting this information from Melrose, sharing it with the community. I'm wondering, how has the school committee responded to this? I don't know if you have a select board or what your town government is, and what good things are happening, I guess, is really what I want to know, is what has come, from this, and where do you see, some things moving forward towards more justice for sure.
I'll start and then I'll send it over to you, Corey. But I'll just say, like, when we first started sharing these data, I think people were pretty eager to dismiss them. And that's why one of the reasons we talk about pushback is people basically just said the data aren't good and we're not going to engage. I think we sent a letter to this school committee and got one response that said the data aren't good. And so we didn't receive like a strong positive response, but I do feel hopeful that things are changing because, Corey, if you want to talk about the forum, I know you talked about it, but just to reiterate the hopefulness of.
Yeah, I mean, and we've, as I mentioned, like the city just voted on a housing production plan, and there are several active anti-racism groups in Melrose that we're in community with. So that we did represent points of view when the housing production plan was being discussed, and we definitely advocated for racial equity was the strategy in the plan. We definitely put a lot of support behind that, had people vote for that strategic objective. And then, yes, a big step we're taking is having candidate forums on racial justice. So the mayors, we had the mayor, answer questions. The city council will tomorrow. So they are seeing this data. They are seeing these racial harms, and at least they're thinking about them. They're making statements towards them. And then we can hold them accountable to what their plans are. Remind them. So it's at least as you have elections, these are people who are coming in informed. They know it ahead of time. So we're happy to be ahead of have the issue in advance towards, in the process.
Thanks, Corey. I see Catherine's hand, and then I see there's some text in the chat too, but let's start with Catherine. Maybe you're on mute, Catherine. I don't see you right now. Let me go.
So sorry. Yeah,
Oh,
Michelle.
Okay. Yeah.
To piggyback on Michelle, I'm curious in particular the police chief's response, and also it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the police are not allowed to ask the race of a person. So I'm just wondering how that might factor in also to your data. And the third question is, have you done we have an equity audit done in our school system in Belmont, and we'd certainly like to get a townwide equity audit. I wonder if you could speak to that. Thank you.
I can speak to the first part. Thank you. And I can speak to the first part in that we have not talked. We got a new police chief I don't know how long it's been, a couple of months ago. So we're waiting to have that conversation since the new person is in, and we're doing the election things first. To your point about the arrest records, there are several things about the arrest records that could be factors affecting the results. But my advice is find the data first and the story and have them react to it, because the reporting, I think, could be voluntary, but I don't know what that means. I don't know. Yes, I don't know if it's police officers' discretion or if it's department policy. Those are the conversations we'll have. But the point is, we're not waiting to get data from them. We're saying, this is what you told the state, and what you told the state is troubling. And so at least the conversation is
For
different.
sure.
Right. Jane, I don't know about the equity audit. I just don't know.
I'm not sure if that's similar to the racial climate survey that we did, or like maybe 2 weeks to change. We've done a couple things that are similar. One was sort of an equity audit that happened once and didn't happen again, and was data were not collected consistently from all city institutions. Also, it was called 2 weeks to change, which tells you right there that nobody really intended to invest deeply in either the gathering of data or the reflecting upon or taking action on data. It seemed very much like white supremacy culture, like, let's just take care of this in 2 weeks. So that was one thing we did, but we also had a racial climate survey that was conducted in our city a couple of years ago. We have a report on it on our website, and just some very concerning findings there. We didn't lift it up to you tonight because those data are specific to Melrose. And so, we're trying to share with you sources that any of you can use. But that racial climate survey really yielded that Black people are less comfortable, less likely to feel they can be their authentic selves in Melrose, less comfortable interacting with city institutions. And our city completely glossed over that. We got a report back from the city that basically said, like, yeah, we did the study and that's it. And we took and reanalyzed the data. One of our members created a new data set for us from the publicly available data. And we reanalyzed it and saw really quite striking racial inequities that the city didn't think to mention. So it's not, I don't mean to leave you on such a negative note, but you really need to do this work, hold the city accountable. Like, if your city is like ours, they're not like super eager to bring these things to light. It's like, they're not proud of it. They don't want it to be them. Our motto is one community open to all, and everything we do flies in the face of that, and nobody likes that. And so the goal is, like, sometimes just to shut us down or look the other way. So but I do believe that this work is going to create change over time. So I hope you will
well,
stick
we
with
actually
it.
have a diversity task force for the town. So our town is actually doing some of this work already, but not
Great.
But this data is helpful too. Thank you.
Wonderful.
As we continue to link arms with each other, one city, one city, one city, we can come together and really demand the change that is needed. Let's continue to ask that question. What story is your city or town telling, right? Thank you so much, Corey and Jane, for these gems and these resources for the toolkits, because we definitely are able to put them to use, and knowing that you are going to be there as a resource for questions and for continued support as we build our teams, absolutely priceless. Let's continue to spread the word and get more communities involved. And I see Saskia is here with us today. Thank you everyone for attending. With respect to time, it's 8:07. We're happy to stay on a little extra till about 1:15. So if we have any questions, please feel free to ask. We're here and we have some resources for you. Thank you. Any words, Saskia? Not to put you on the spot, but thank you for all the work that you've been doing and your inspiration.
Nothing at all, you guys. I've been hosting a watch party at the Democracy Center. So I've had people here. Deep apologies, and I'm dropping in the chat information so that you guys are aware of the work that's happening. Right next door to you, Cambridge is moving to create an American Freedmen Commission. We already have our immigrant commissions in every town, regional office, state office, federal. Same thing has to happen for American Freedmen if we are serious about this reparations movement. So that's the work that's happening, that we're doing. We're getting our American Freedmen recognized so that the reparations movement can move forward. Thank you, Urga, and I'm bye, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Saskia.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saskia.
Data informs, and let's get that information out and let's ask those hard questions. And to your point, Corey and Jane, we need to really use this data and put it to work, because we are getting elected officials. This is election season, folks. Let's ask those hard questions to get those answers that we're looking for and to get an action plan going, because we definitely need to start healing and stop ignoring the obvious, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, really appreciate you all being here. And thank you again for inviting us.
Yeah, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank
Let's
you
stay
so much.
connected. Thank you, everyone.
Feel
Let's
free to
stay
email
connected.
us.
Yes.
Thank you.